Thank you all for joining us. Workshop number 4, Opportunities for Innovation. And that's the date today. So got everything going well. So a quick outline, I've got something called the House of Quality, and I've called it Lite. I don't want to overwhelm you with a full engineering lecture today. And then I'm going to talk about something called Design with Intent. These are these prompts that maybe might help generate some discussion, make you think of something you haven't thought of before. And then I'll try to get out of the way and get this panel discussion or open Q&A going here. So my thinking was, maybe we're done within an hour, hour and a half tops, depending on how involved the conversation goes. And maybe what I'm going to do is do my little laser pointer there. And maybe if I could turn this over to you, Jillian, to do the land acknowledgement statement.
Yep, absolutely. So the land acknowledgement statement, we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wet'nut peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by the Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We also acknowledge that as we are a virtual meeting, that many others may be on different territory as well. So please take the time to reflect on and honor the Indigenous communities of your territories.
Thank you very much, Jillian. And so the next, just to keep consistent, I'm not sure if you're joining us for the first time. Here's our mission statement for this Praxis Ideation Challenge. We're trying to demonstrate a transformative, commercializable concept to improve the quality of life for people living with spinal cord injuries. So that's where we're all trying to get to, and we appreciate you for joining. Here's again the ideation key. So conveniently, we're on workshop number 4 here, and that's the ideate stage. So, maybe we're kind of at that process. From my background, I'm always encouraging my students in my capstone design classes to do a lot of iterations. So maybe we're kind of circling back a little bit to sort of some of the framing from last time and seeing how we can spring forward as well. So here's, let me jump right into it. Here's my House of Quality Lite. Really what I'm trying to get to here is connecting what do users need. Users fits nicely in this small little box. Customers, anybody with whatever problem you have, and you're trying to connect that to how you're actually going to do that. Again, I'm trying to refrain myself. If you're going to ask me a question on where this House of Quality is coming from, I'll probably start going off on some tangents. So I'll just keep it at that. Pretty simple, high-level stuff, trying to connect these two things together, make sure they map pretty well. And, when I say how are you going to address that need? And so, the spin today, the flavor will be this design with intent, and I'll give you a link. Maybe what I can actually do right now, this is freely available material that anybody can access online. Maybe what I can do in the chat once we'll figure out how to share this later. You can access all these things. And it's sort of a framework of, it's mainly geared towards usability. How can you think of users right at the very beginning, how people are going to use your design. This is really important from my area, medical device design. Oftentimes, if you don't think about how people are going to use it, it leads to a lot of mistakes and errors and adverse events. And so that's kind of the thinking there. Okay, so really what I'm talking about is you've got, in my lingo, you've got customer requirements. You're trying to link these to engineering specifications. In less daunting terms, you're taking something that's often qualitative, that somebody's demanding, you to make, and you're trying to turn that into something quantitative, something that a designer can say, this design is better than another design. So here's the full house of quality. Let me animate my way through this as we chop off some of this. Again, this is many kind of layers. We can expand on this. I will say that, you know, there's a chance that this works better for something that's well established. So, you know, if I'm Toyota and I've got a car, you know what all the engines do and all the parts. It maybe doesn't work so great if you're innovating in a space that doesn't have anything that's well established. It's harder to use this system. At the core of this is thinking about who has the problem. So it's not just sort of the person with the problem, there's other stakeholders involved. So there's that aspect that's really important. And then for all these different stakeholders, you have to think about what do they need or want. And so it's almost like in engineering, you've got, again, our good old friend Excel. We've got a sort of a bunch of rows in our Excel sheet. So again, this is, you know, what a customer or user, what they want, what they need, maybe some excitement features, some bells and whistles. And, you know, not every stakeholder wants things to the same degree. So you can also look at sort of in relative measures what the actual user of the device values more compared to another stakeholder. And then so you have to figure out, you know, how are you actually going to do it? How are you going to design for this? And that's almost sort of the vertical columns, trying to match them up. So these would be, you know, my engineering specifications. I would say these are criteria that can be measured and ideally have target values. So a criteria for me would be something that a design should be. And so you can compare different designs. One should be better than another based on some kind of measure. And so ideally you kind of map, for sure you need each customer requirement to be matched with some kind of design criteria, but oftentimes multiple criteria map to different customer requirements. So for sure there should be a nice one-to-one mapping, but it gets kind of complicated. They all interact with each other. So you can start to, you know, think about how does each of these specifications relate to a customer's requirement, and then you can come up with their relative importance, because you as a designer, you're going to have to focus on certain core things. You can't focus on everything. There's some things that are more important than others. So, you know, your question is, you know, what do you focus on? You're going to have to prioritize one design criteria more than another. And then if you carry on and you go further with this, you can compare this to what's out there now. If you've got an established market like wheelchairs, there's lots of other existing designs. You can compare yourself to them. And so you're going to have to expand and think about those things as well. Okay, so, you know, there's my first chance. I probably, this is where I sense myself talking too long. I need to wet my whistle. Maybe here's a chance for potential questions from the audience already. Thinking about, you know, customer user requirements. We've got maybe two different people here, Alexis and Terry, with different opinions and different experiences. If there's any questions you have right now, maybe for your specific device, what do you think users need or want? What do you need any feedback on what you think would be exciting as it pertains to your particular context? I'd be interested to sort of get some feedback now. Otherwise, I'll take a quick drink of water and can carry on. And I'm just expanding here. If you can feel free to raise your hand or just activate the microphone.
Well, Chris, as we jump in, so the theme is to where are the opportunities for innovation? How do you find opportunities by talking to the who?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's, you know, it's not just sort of like an N of one, like you have to do, you know, talk to multiple people. So The opportunities sort of are in this who column. So, you know, everybody's got a specific user in mind, and usually you've either got these different personas. So you're designing for, you know, one person with a certain lifestyle, with a certain situation. So there's those opportunities coming up with different personas, different target users, or, you know, thinking of the different stakeholders. So, you know, there's all sorts of ways to flesh that out. So I'd say that's opportunity number one, is to really understand either sort of individual users, or then sort of those other stakeholders, whether it's maybe primary care physicians or the rest of the family members. I see Sudesh, you have your hand raised.
Terry had hers first.
Oh, Terry?
Oh,
yeah, sure, I didn't see that.
Sort of related to that, but also Sudesh is probably going to ask his questions, but what he wrote in the chat there. I was going to say, for people with spinal cord injury, there's been some really great research done on the priority requirements of what users or consumers or people with lived experience, however you want to call them, want. And in that report, it was, you know, bladder, bowel, sexual function, hand, grasp. Those were sort of the top four, but so it's an Kim Anderson report from like 2009, I think, or 2004 maybe. So I would look into sort of that research. And there's quite a lot, I think, that has been done on that. But, and you know, if you're looking for a group of people with spinal cord injury and want to get understanding of their needs and what they want, a great opportunity is just to connect to those spinal cord injury associations that are around you, or organizations. So I work for one here in BC that's called Spinal Cord Injury BC, but there's also like the Global Consumer Network, or the North American Association of Spinal Cord Injury, which is a great group and connects people internationally. So those are just some ideas.
I'm just going to expand on that too, just as absolutely what I was thinking of, Terry, was you need to understand, as you know, Chris was pointing out, one user to the next, one person with one spinal cord injury to the next, even at the same level of injury, will use a tool, a gadget, or whatever in a different way, or they won't want to use it. So you know, you might find somebody that wants to use your idea and give you some really great guidance, and then somebody else who you would think would actually want to be using it has a completely different way, or they're not interested. So definitely getting multiple opinions, reaching out to these groups that Terry has mentioned, shooting out the question to their group of their big email list, to, you know, a little survey or something. If a, you know, say SCIBC is willing to send it out to their mail list to fill out a couple boxes for you, could get some really interesting feedback and direct your design ideas.
Sudesh, was that kind of in line what you're thinking of?
Yeah, thanks, Terry and Alexis. You kind of answered the question, but as you were talking, I got a follow-up question. So when we talk to users, they have a list of requirements and they have their own priorities. But when we want to actually build a product, then we have to look at engineering considerations. So how do we sort of manage the like balance between like what is the actual need, like feasibility and from an engineering perspective?
Well, that's a tough one. That's every engineer's challenge, right, Sudesh? Yeah, and I think maybe Joseph, I've had a few discussions lately. We're hiring a new design faculty in the electrical and engineering compartment, and there's kind of this thinking of co-design. How much do you involve the people with the problems? And, you know, normally, you know, it's really hard because you get all, let's say you're kind of on the ground and you're hustling to talk with people to really understand the need. So you kind of got that face-to-face interaction. You're not stuck behind marketing or something like this. But then once you start going, how often do you come back with the users and sort of loop them in with what you're doing? I don't know, Terry and Alexis, like how often do you want to be in the loop with all these things? Or, I mean, can you really be expected to?
Well, not even thinking of the drain on, our time. I'm just thinking as a developer of an item, I think of, I worked in IT for a number of years, and in the developer area, and there were times when a developer thought they knew what the user wanted, but they started to create, let's call it their button, within the software, and then discovered later that that wasn't how the user used it, because they went off on a tangent. So I would have to suggest to, if you've gone in a new direction, touch back. I don't think it hurts just to take a 5-minute phone call, a 10, 15-minute, Zoom meeting with whomever you're speaking with, to make sure you're on the right track if you've gone in a different vein, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think it's imperative to engage people from ideation to the whole commercialization, all the way through every stage. And the reason why I say that is because as a person with lived experience, we are our value. These projects are meaningful to us. I'm not going to sign up for something that I don't see is going to be valuable, or that I'm not going to add value to. So they're potentially changing my life. And I am a person that is going to be using this product. And if it's going to be changing my life, I'm incredibly invested in it. So I think it's really imperative to keep checking in. And even if it's just a research project and you're doing a survey, people want to know the results of that. And unfortunately, we don't get a lot of that information, but I'm doing a survey and I want to see what happened. What did other people think? How did they think like me? So I think through the whole process, and if you can ensure that if it's a research project, that there's funding, even if it's a small honorarium, to be able to provide, because employment, as Alexis knows, is really low in people with disabilities in particular. So and it can affect, employment can actually affect their funding as well that they get. So oftentimes it's really scary for a person to be making money, but if you can build into your funding grants the ability to be able to pay honorarium for people to be able to participate, that would be the best.
Mm-hmm.
So just on that note, if I may reach out, so you're absolutely right. So there are multiple conversations that are happening. One on the research side, when do we engage with people and subjects, and how does it, when is it meaningful? And increasingly, the idea is you don't just engage with people at the end or once to ask questions and leave things. That quite often better research is done if you engage with people from the very beginning, when you start asking the questions about what to do and where to go. The same thing is true in sort of the design, co-design communities, debates, discussions. Is it really co-design if you only involve people in one aspect and you make all the other decisions yourself? Are you really doing something that really as in these are partners, these are people that you're working with? So I have one colleague who is adamant that unless people that are involved in the co-design are there all the time and you're always kind of looping and iterating together, it's not really co-design. It's getting someone to a focus group once or asking a few questions. That's not the same as involving people.
I've found,
I was just going to add that also just one person is not enough, because Alexis and I, we can share our own personal experiences, but there's so many other experiences and people doing other things, and it's really important to try to find a good balance of diversity in your market. So sorry, Alexis, go ahead.
No, oh, good. when both Joseph and Terry were speaking of like surveys and questions, it brought me back to I'm involved in a committee that advises the governments in an area that I live in, and a fellow was he was just about to put a survey out to like the whole North Shore, which is lots of population. And we began, and it wasn't just about disability, but we began to read his questions. We're like, oh, wow, who vetted this? Because I mean, even the English was odd. So even thinking of how you word your questions and getting feedback on to make sure you're asking the right question. And I mean, I learned a lot just listening to Joseph in a couple of the breakout rooms most recently when he was drilling into what was the actual problem. Kind of blew me away because I was thinking what people's problem that they were putting out was the problem. But there's so many different ways to just to make sure you're asking what you're really trying to find out, you know. So getting feedback at all levels is, you know, as we reiterate, is really important.
Thanks for going off on that tangent. Was did somebody else have any, or I won't even call it a tangent, I'll call it we're on our meandering path here, so the path we take is the way we go. Do we have anyone else? I thought I saw an active microphone. Maybe not. Okay, well, you know, Alexis, I was even thinking of putting up a little cartoon that kind of talked about your exact thing, what the difference between what the customer said and there's, so maybe I should have kept that in, but maybe for next time. Okay, so let me carry on and think about maybe some other thoughts to put in your minds. So I figured out how to put this chat on here. I'm so used to teaching on a different platform that I think I've learning on the fly here. So I just posted a link of where this comes from. I'm also going to post another link. So that's like the hard copy. The other link I have is a mural board, but don't worry, it's just to sort of see all this on a big sort of virtual thing. So you can click on that mural board, and I've taken out all these sort of panels and sort of thrown them up on a digital whiteboard. And I've even embedded the link to this design with intent on the mural board as well. So you can zoom in on all these different panels rather than flipping through PDFs. So we'll see if that helps with the back channeling. You know, the reason I bring this up is, you know, you're thinking about influencing user behavior or the behavior of anybody that interacts with your device, and this design with intent is, you know, thinking everything sort of, there's environmental effects and if sort of cognitive or effects that are going on within one's mind. So, you know, you can think how people interact with stuff. You can think about ways to make it so they don't are not as likely to make an error when using it. So all sorts of architectural things. I don't know if anybody's doing any architectural features. You might have to adapt what that means to your particular context. Security probably is relevant if you're doing anything app related. Going around on the bottom there, there's maybe certain evil ways that you can get people to interact with your devices. You can either make certain things obsolete sooner, so you can require them to refresh them. How people think about your device or perceive it, maybe even how they have fun with it is important to think about as well. And so here's some panels. You know, just if you're just looking at the screen or looking at this recording rather than looking up the links yourself, you know, all sorts of maybe prompts thinking about how you give people warnings if they're going to be using something. You could think about giving people feedback, you know, how this is probably more like graphical user interfaces, but there's all sorts of things. How do you know that somebody's using a system that's actually responding to them? Sometimes, you know, maybe you leave certain gaps or things blank, and that encourages people to go and use your system. Again, these are really general. I kind of have to do a lot of hand waving here, and that I don't really know what you in the crowd are working on. So maybe that's part of it, is sort of thinking about finding one of these design with intent prompts and see, that's interesting. How could I apply that to my context? Things like simplicity are pretty general and easy to understand. So this little design prompt, could you just press a button, I don't know, and plant a tree or something like this? I've seen another button. Could I just, I'm setting up some tax-free savings accounts, and it seems really difficult to why do I have to call 3 people? Could I just press a button and have money go straight into the mutual fund or something like that? Maybe there's some interesting ideas. There's maybe all sorts of other ideas of how you think about things. This was a prototype or concept of how to turn lights on, and you turn this inside switch, and you want to order things correctly, so you match red and black. And maybe do you enable some fake affordances? Maybe that button on the elevator to close the doors doesn't really actually do anything, but makes you feel good because you can press it to close it faster. So those are some design with intent prompts. And so really, again, me just trying to get out of the way here. Hopefully people have accessed some of these either on the mural board, and you're zooming in right now. I've kind of pasted out a lot. I've maybe intentionally left a gap there for you to go and look at some more Machiavellian ways for design prompts. Maybe it's just, so my simple thinking was, take the approach how might we design for simplicity? How might we design for adding in a confirmation step? How might we design feedback through the form of our device? So I guess, again, these are really general. It's kind of up to you, the audience, to ask our panel, how might you design for blank? So there's the gauntlet thrown out there. We'll see if any questions come up. Otherwise, I'm left to my own devices and asking Alexis and Terry how they might design for some of these different aspects.
Well, Chris, let me jump in here.
Yep.
Let's talk about some of these things, because you're absolutely right. These are all sort of avenues or opportunities or ways to think about things to innovate in different ways. So simplicity, what does that mean? I've heard people say, oh, we want simplicity, or we want the minimal viable product. How does that affect, in Terry and Alexis, maybe in your life, are there things that are really overly complicated, that are more complicated than they need to be? Are there sort of opportunities to look at things and how do we make this easier to access or easier to use?
I have the most awesome cable setup in the world. Shaw Cable has gone to a voice activated remote, and that's just for everybody. Well, you have to buy a certain level of cable. I go to my sister's house who uses TELUS. I don't remember how to press a button and find channels. I want to, watch Netflix or something, and this remote has 50 buttons on it for optic TV. I'm like, what the hell? Where's the button where I just press and I go Netflix or I go Prime? Shaw has me. They have me for life unless somebody else figures it out, because I can just say that and it opens all my, HGTV. I want to watch, a specific show. For me, that is a usability that everyone would want to ease if they don't have Shaw like I do.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of add to what Alexis is saying. I think we all, whether you have a disability or not, want simplicity in our lives. No one how many times have we read our user guide that we get with our phone, right? I'm sure there's hundreds of features on my phone that I don't even use because I have no idea, and and we're all really busy. We're all living, so we just do what we want to do. We want it to be simple. We don't want to read the manual that comes with it. It should be just super easy. And working with people with disabilities is really no different than that. The one thing I want to add though with someone with a disability is it already takes so much time to do something. So, you know, for us to like find that adaptive equipment or even just to write or to type, it takes me like triple the amount of time maybe that it would someone that has working fingers, right? Although Alexis with her fancy gadget could probably keep up with a lot of you. But so, you know, and it gets really frustrating, or it can be really frustrating for us sometimes. So keeping it easy and simple and is, I think, really key. And, you know, you just want them to grab your product and start using it. Simple as that.
And I find though remotes for items are obviously useful. I think of fans, you know, fans that are out of reach, you know, even your TV remote. But I am struggling because, you know, without the hand function, and now I'm laying in bed. My partner's gone to Ontario. I lived on my own for 17 years, and he's been with me moved in for the last 5, and I'm ruined because I can't remember how to do things on my own. And if I drop stuff, I'm like, crap, now I have to get it. So I'm now Googling and looking up smart devices. How do I turn that fan on from the bed? Because the remote has stopped working. There is a remote. My fan is now 10 years old. And I want to turn the fan off because now I'm cold in the morning, but I want it on at night. Yeah, there's awesome that there's remotes for things, but obviously there's a lot of smart devices out there now, and voice activated to think about your products in that manner. You know, if they are going to be developed for people with the funky hands, you know, how are we turning them on and off in a way that, you know, one, I don't want the button to be ugly if it needs a button. Sometimes, you know, the open door opener button can be like this big. You're like, really, I needed it that big. So making it sexy as well, I think, is a way for people to buy into something. Is sometimes many of us try to be as gadget free as possible, but the reality is with disability, a lot of times you do need an extra piece that somebody else doesn't. But I don't want it to be so in your face that like, oh, this is for somebody with a disability that only they can buy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. That, you know, simplicity is a challenging thing because so my job, I'm going to throw down the gauntlet. My job as an engineer is to figure out, how do I define simplicity? Do I reduce the number of steps it takes to get from one channel to the next? Or is simplicity reducing the number of parts it takes to repair something with? There's a lot of ways to define that. And, you know, the amount of steps might be different for you, Alexis, versus somebody, like you said, like your partner, who's able to reach down and grab stuff quicker. Maybe what I'm going to drag over here to my shared screen. So, you know, there's my Miro board, and I could zoom into another panel, you know, so, you know, this is kind of thinking of like how can you adapt a system to match individual users' needs and abilities? Maybe Terry, or I'll pass it over to you. How much do you value being able to customize the things you use? Is that always necessary for you, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess it depends on what it is. I do find, like in clothing, for example, because I really enjoy fashion, there's a lot of customization, and I developed my own line of fashion a number of years ago. It really made sense to customize all the clothes because everyone's needs are different. So I think the customization will depend on your scale of market, right? So if you're specifically looking for, I'm going to help every single person with a spinal cord injury, then you may need more customization. But if you're targeted to, you know, I'm going to work with someone with upper, you know, arm extremity or breathing device or something that, you know, your customization needs may be a little bit less.
Yeah, for sure.
As I'm listening to you guys talking, I think maybe there are a couple things that are really coming up for me. So you're talking about simplicity and ease. I don't think they're the same thing. I think there may be two different axes on the same plane, where on the one hand, simplicity, you could have a simple device that does one thing. You press the button and it records a voice. You press it twice, it plays back the voice. That's a very simple and very focused use of something. And it also happens to be easy, I guess. On the other hand, something like the TV remote, there's a reason supposedly for all the buttons, because then you have all these choices and you can do these things, but then you lose the simplicity of watching television, which nobody does anymore in the way that, at least when I was a kid, because there's just too much going on. So I think that's one of the interesting things, is when you're thinking about opportunities for innovation, one way is, how do I find something that is targeted specifically to a particular way of doing something and makes it simple, versus something that is maybe complex but easy to use, like voice activation. Alexis, I tried voice activation, trying to use my TV, and it always sends me somewhere else, or it shuts it off. It never, maybe mine's generations behind Shaw, but I will tell you, like, it never actually worked once effectively until I gave up.
Really? No, mine is awesome. Like, and that, even, you know, Barry, who has impatience with technology, is pretty good. I just recently showed my dad that he could speak into his phone to text, because my dad is, let's call him a creative speller. He figures if he can use all the letters in the alphabet, then hey, why not? He's an amazing electrician, but can't spell worth a beans. And he's very excited by this. He's sending new messages, but they're quite rambling. So now I need to teach him how to put punctuation in. But yeah, I know voice activation, I can't even imagine how complex to build, but it's sure a nice, easy button to press for some.
And I think that's my second point that I'm hearing in terms of innovation and approaching. It's this tension that, at least in healthcare, that is played out and is continuing to play out. And that's the tension between precision and personalization. So in the healthcare space, the way that I've heard it talk about is that personalized medicine is medicine that deals with the person. So what would you like? There may be multiple ways of addressing an issue, but the practitioner or the approach is to ask the individual and say, what are your preferences? And this could be, for example, one that's close to my heart, is heart conditions. You could go and attempt to exercise and be healthy through eating and diet, or you could take pills. And the personalized medicine approach is to actually ask someone what they would prefer. The precision medicine approach would be to find out what works best for each kind of person or group of people, and then tell them what to do and force them into that. So I guess the point I'm hearing is, maybe there are also opportunities now, with the level of sophistication our technologies are coming, to do one or the other, or to address. So it may be there's a need for, let's say, particular innovation, and you could cater it either to specific individuals so that you have the customization there, or the best way of doing something that disregards some of the personalization. Does that make sense, or am I just rambling?
No, I mean, I think that makes sense. The second point being that if you're not trying to make a product that can't be customized, after the fact, the reality is when you're trying to design for, people with disabilities, you can't design for all different disabilities. It's impossible. So you are going to be eliminating some over others with your design. That's just a reality, and that's okay in my mind. I'm a lot about the built environment with what I advise on, and the reality of the tactile strips for people with vision loss over others in mobility devices, and how to fit that into safe walking for somebody who can't see, and easy rolling for somebody who doesn't want to roll over the bumps. And a friend of mine and I go over that again and again in our committees as we're advising developers on the best way to go about trying to fit these two disabilities together. Not always perfect, that's for sure, but it can be done. And as I said, you will obviously not be able to create a device that's good for everybody. And in my mind, as I said, that's okay.
Yeah, Joseph, I just switched the screen over there to playfulness, like how you can get people to interact more with it. And the example there is that the black hole where you throw the coins down, and kids love that, and trying to encourage more donations. Is there maybe I was kind of riffing off you, Alexis, thinking like do you enjoy using the voice activation now, or does that ever sort of get into it? Or is there anything that you can think of that's any device you've used or something like this that becomes more playful because you enjoy it?
More. My boyfriend, full able-bodied, he was the one that does voice activation on his phone, and he speaks all of his messages, sends them out, and he's always laughing at me when I'm typing, and I'm the one with the funky hands. So it's about buy-in too, I believe. And some people are first adopters, we know, and others take longer. Devices that, let me think. So Terry, that you have one off the top of your head that excites you first off, and I'll think about this more.
Well, not really, but I do think aesthetics does play a part in playfulness as well. So as you were saying, Alexis, earlier, medical devices typically are really hideous. And I will tell you, after I left rehab, I refused to ever go to a hospital again. And I spent a year in there. That was enough. And I never wanted to be reminded of those moments, because oftentimes they're not the greatest memories for people. So we don't want to have hospital-looking equipment or adaptive devices in our home. So if you can try to make them, pink, that's great, and that attracts people. Bright colors, or, something that does look fun. Or maybe I would interact with my phone a little bit more if it was easier to know what all those apps did.
But
I'm gonna run and grab something, because just speaking of what Terry mentioned, and sorry, Joseph, to interrupt. I'll be back in just a second.
No, no problem at all. Terry, I think that talks to the other idea, is that people and all of us don't necessarily want the thing we're using or the thing to identify us in negative ways. So you don't want to take out a medical looking device and ostracize you from everyone else because you need it in public, and that labels you for whatever condition. Like, that's part of the choice for individual privacy, integrity, and identity. But it also is aesthetics. Like, I don't want to take out my syringe that I know I need to have it, but that doesn't mean that I want to show that that's what it's going to be. Like, I'm okay with it looking like something else.
I take baclofen for my spasms. I take it 3 times a day, and I actually use it a Tic Tac bottle, a little Tic Tac container for my meds, because I just get tired of taking out my prescription bottle and tossing it in while I'm at Starbucks or something. And so now I dump a few as I run around town and just eat it out of a Tic Tac container. But what I wanted to show you, and Terry made me think of this, is my little shark here. Actually, I got it from my sister. She uses one, and she's able-bodied. So this guy, it's got a nice big tail, so I can do my curl around the end and hang on to it. But it's actually for everybody to use, because it's actually to pull the oven trays out so they're not too hot. But I happen to also, and the mouth is to push it in, but I also use it as a when I can't reach light switches and things, if I have counters in my way, I can reach lots of things. So, this is a gadget that's created for able-bodied people that I have embraced, and I use it for a lot of different things, and it's fun, and it's just a chunk of wood that I think my brother-in-law made, but you can actually buy them. But talk about playfulness in a reacher.
And that's all the rage these days with COVID. You can now buy things on various sites to put on your keychain that allow you to reach or grab things, things that now are disguised as other things, but are really door openers that you don't want to know. You want to let people know that you're actually not hot about touching doorknobs.
You don't want to let people know that you're a germaphobe.
But it's okay now.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. That electric door button and the automatic door button is going to be everywhere thanks to COVID. Thanks, COVID.
Yeah, or now you expect things to just wave your hand and have doors open. And maybe my quick riff off that is, I made one of those too. It was like a bat symbol or something like that, like a Batman, and you had to put your hand way too far in. But thinking of disguising stuff too, it could go, the opposite direction. You could, I'm not a smoker, but they cover up all the warnings now with extra cases, so you don't have to see the graphic warnings. But I see Andrew, you got your hand up there. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to bring something up that like both Terry and Alexis had discussed. And Terry, you actually I resonated exactly with what you had said, because when you see so much, like whether it be medical equipment or something that's like large, bulky, or something that somebody doesn't really understand, you're not going to have like buy-in to this, or specific, or as well, like when it comes to a phone app or any other application that comes out. Like, by the way, sorry that nobody can see me because my camera is always on and off on my computer. Like, whether it be a phone app, there's 500 or 1,000 of them, like a tongue twister. That's either on the iOS or the Play Store, that take your pick. It's like somebody goes out and says, oh, well, go and try out this phone app. Okay, well, what's different from all the other 2,000 of them that are on the iOS or Play Store? And Chris, you brought up through your presentation, I've been I've been an attendee of all of these presentations. And no, sorry, it was Joseph actually that brought it up about aesthetics. And that's exactly what I thought about when I was designing the device that I created for strengthening the neck region for people who suffer from neck pain, neck soreness, people who are working from home these days, people who have degenerative disc disease. I've been working with physical therapists, and I'm a practicing athletic therapist for the last 15 years. So I'm familiar with the exercises that are commonly suggested by physios, athletic therapists, massage therapists, osteopaths, that when I created my device, I told myself, okay, when I do my PhD, I'm going to study the application of what this device, of what the motion does, and find a way to make a portable version of this not like something that's bulky or anything where like I don't know if I'm allowed to share my screen very quickly. Like, can I? Okay, I forget. Like where if you look at devices that are on the market, they're bulky, they're large, and they're not something that you can transport around easily. A device that I created, it's like, okay, make something that's portable, easy to use, aesthetically appealing, cost effective, and
Okay.
will actually target the person that actually needs to use it, and not just like go and make something that could just be a fad and say, okay, like here's something
But
new on the
Andrew,
market.
I would challenge you that I think that with your devices, you bring it up, you need to do a little bit more work with people with, if you're targeting it for people with spinal cord injuries
Yeah.
and hand motion disabilities, that you need to do a little bit more work with the people with lived experience.
Well, right now there's a proof of validation trial that's going on with my device. It started about a month ago, so that will be going forward for the next 2 years to validate the device. And once that's all done, then I'm going for FDA and Health Canada. Well, also I'm not going to go for Health Canada approval, solely FDA approval, because Health Canada then I have to try to register for an MDEL, and that could take years, like upon like God knows how many years to get registered for that.
Fair enough.
But I am in the process of doing the proof of validation right now because I have a research institute that is in the process of doing it right now.
Perfect.
Yeah, there we go. So I like it starts with aesthetics, and playfulness doesn't have to mean that you're playing with it, but it can be engaging. It can be something that makes you comfortable using it. Alexis, you were talking, maybe just to circle back on the different material properties, the bumps on the side of the road, and this is maybe more common in certain European countries, where they have more bike lanes, although where I am, there seems to be bike lanes everywhere. But even sort of thinking of like sharing the road, you can sort of feel the texture of the roadway with different cobblestones, and where you're supposed to ride is one place. And if you feel yourself having a different texture underfoot, maybe you're in the bike lane, or you're not supposed to be walking there, or you're supposed to be going one place or the other. I wonder if I had another one. I didn't put it up here. Even thinking of like getting people to do or take the path you want them to take are, sort of different design features, so if you're using these design with intent kind of features, sort of you have to think of architecture maybe in sort of the form factor of different devices and such. Yeah, I'm curious. I think Joseph put it out there in the comments to try to challenge me to see. I'm happy to sort of riff off any thoughts that anybody has. If the how is often the tricky part from the engineering standpoint of you're always wondering if what targets you choose match up and make a difference with the user. And maybe like, was it Andrew said, it takes a lot of, research. Sometimes it takes a lot of study. It's not something that you can just sort of put on a chart and sort of check off on a list. A lot of times it takes a lot of formative study before you can kind of get to the end. And even then you're still with these, I think you alluded to regulations and stuff like that. You're still thinking of continually improving your device. I know that's the medical device standards focus mostly on safety and efficacy, but that's kind of behind the theme is, is continual improvement. If you can make sure that your device is always doing a little bit better, those are going to be better devices in the end.
Mm-hmm. Just going to your picture that's on the screen, you talk about the segmentation and spacing. What can you do to what you don't want a user to lay down on the benches, so you put separated spaces in between. Now, here's the disability story when it comes into this design of a bench that has no legs. people with vision loss, or many people, use canes, and they need to know where a leg of a bench is, so that they're not going to trip, and they are going to nail their thighs on this seat as they come through. Yes, for me as a person in a wheelchair, I can come up to this bench and sit beside my partner and be happy. But my friend Amy is going to like take her knee out probably on this thing when she's walking along. So definitely speaking, we've said, Terry and I and everybody here, talk to many users as you possibly can. And ideally, I think I just this major statement, a big overarching, try not to build barriers, any new barriers with your new gadget, even if it may not fit for all disabilities. Think about the barriers that you could potentially be building, and think about ways of not doing that.
Yeah, I just saw an example of something like this run amok. I think it was a bench in a subway station in Philadelphia, and they kind of sloped it down so now nobody can sit on it. It's obnoxiously over designed. And yeah, I'm kind of scrolling through to see if I found anything else that might have been an interesting conversation starter, but nothing really came to mind. So, in the sake of keeping things short and sweet, Terry or Alexis, did you kind of have any other thoughts about, how should I say, other things that our designers should pay attention to? On your experience, lessons that we should pay attention to in terms of what you think is valuable and what should be addressed?
I think I was realizing, as I have grown with my disability, I definitely use things in different ways and have discarded old and taken on new. So along with your talk to many different types of people with disabilities, make sure that there's from new to more developed, we'll call it, people of that disability, because they definitely will also have different ways of using things. I used to think that I could only wear pants. I have an indwelling catheter and it's attached to my leg, and I couldn't wear my sexy tights and things. And as Terry's spoken of, we adapt our clothing to fit our needs. And I figured out how to wear tights and skirts and things since then, and share it with as many people as I can. The ladies that want to, wear something different. So over the time frame of your disability, also, ask your users for that feedback on your creation.
Yeah, thanks for riffing off that, Terry. I mean, you're always, you're changing in time. I mean, your mood changes from day to day too. I mean, so who you are today isn't necessarily who you are tomorrow.
So I also think that it's important when you're dealing with design and co-design that you are actually working with more than one person, and triangulating what you hear. So if you have people of a particular group or persona that are telling you this one thing, it's important to go to people outside of that group that have similar sort of characteristics and needs and see if they will tell you the same one thing. Because if they will tell you something completely different, it could be that the first group is just a bunch of your friends that want you to feel good about yourself and are telling you this one thing and that's it. But the other group, it doesn't care about your feelings and maybe telling you something else. So triangulating anything that you learn is really important, because opportunities for innovation change with context, people, time, culture, place. All of that matters.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of add my last little 2 bits, I guess, is especially in working with people with spinal cord injury, is that you know, you have to be also consider like sensation loss, right? So, or other, you know, secondary complications. So if you're designing something, think of, you know, what are the potential implications of your device that you're creating. So for myself, I have, and Alexis has, curled hands. Some people have flat hands, you know. Some people, you know, can't move their arms. And then with the sensation loss in particular, if you don't feel hot and cold, I have a heating blanket, right? And in rehab, they tell you do not put any heated pad or blanket on you where you can't feel. I do it all the time. I've never experienced a burn yet, but that practicality is there, and you know that warning is there for a reason, right? Because you don't know, and if you get a pressure injury or a sore or, you know, burn, that could be, you know, hospitalization and potential a life-threatening complication to you if you don't recognize it. So those things are really important to take into consideration.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Thank you, Alexis. Those are some great thoughts, and you know, you know, even when I'm teaching my design classes, you know, you're always trying to. A lot of it is left to your own imagination, and it really changes a lot based on who you talk to, and you know, most of the times, you know, these designers that are just getting their feet wet, they kind of listen to whatever the last person told them, and they think that's the word of God. And I think that riffs off what Joseph said. You kind of have to triangulate yourself, and you have to sort of take information from another source, and then, okay, well, did the first person really have the problem? You know, what's really important. You have to make some decisions too on your end when you're trying to optimize something related to your design. So
I'm just going to reiterate as well what Terry mentioned in the beginning, just to, as a closing thought for me. Terry and I both feel strongly with this of honoring the lived experience and what it brings to your device that you're creating. You know, the point of this whole project is to get a device to commercialization, hopefully make you your magic $1 million. In this day and age, that number is not that big anymore, but I still use it as a measure. So the lived experience is what is driving your device. This is what Joseph and Chris are pushing to make sure that you're talking to people. And so honor that, because, and by honor that, we mean pay the person. And it gets a bit uncomfortable when you talk about things like that. And I know that many people don't have a base of money when they're starting to create a device. So where does that come from? What does that look like? Is the tough question. But there's been many a time, well, for the first 20 years of my disability, that I did speaking engagements and happily shared information and never thought anything of it. And then finally, I was actually, you know, I got paid speaking engagements, and that has made me realize the difference of that. We bring value and life-changing value to topics. And so thank you for including Terry and I in this, because it's awesome. And I think these devices, as Terry said, can change our lives, change somebody's life to make their steps a little bit easier. Thanks.
Yeah, so, you know, that's why this whole Praxis challenge, you know, exists. You know, you're kind of wondering at the early stage design, you know, can you really make a full prototype for a few $1,000s? Yeah, maybe. Or, you know, you can put your money to good use and, you know, help connect yourself with people that have the problem that you want to solve too. So sometimes for my classes, the students tried to expense a pizza party for the test subjects they interviewed, and that didn't fly through HR. But, you know, in this context, you know, that's you got to do what you got to do.
No question. If you feed us, we will come.
All the way across Canada. So just in the last closing minutes, since we're sort of wrapping up the discussion, I wanted to give some updates on where we're at in terms of the overall challenge and how it's going. So we have been reviewing projects and applications and making connections, and we're still in the process of that in order to try and find resources and opportunities for those that submitted. Because the idea behind this challenge isn't necessarily like, oh, we're going to have a pitch, or oh, there's a submission deadline, and therefore once it's done, we'd rub our hands together and say, okay, we did it. The idea partly is that we help those that are working on different projects and find and connect them to resources. So those of you that have been submitted, we are still working on finding opportunities to connect you and find resources for you. And you'll be hearing from us shortly, probably by early next week. We have identified the 6 pitch finalists, though, and you can see those on the website. And we encourage you to reach out and invite friends and get people involved, because part of this is also getting awareness and people motivated to support ideation around SCI. And so feel free to promote the pitch on the 5th, during which we will also be announcing the award for the video submission. We had great video submissions from a number of people. It was actually a difficult decision to narrow it down to one award winner. And we'll be reaching out to a number of you who have submitted videos for permission to maybe display them on our site, if you're okay with it. Just again, in the spirit of promoting different ideas and opportunities. So Jillian, have I forgotten something?
No, I think you've covered our bases. And again, if there's anyone that you know who has a great idea or concept and should be a part of this challenge, please refer them over. We would love to hear from them as well.
So we're continuing to help out and find opportunities for people as we go.
Yeah, so there's a good segue into the next workshop. I believe this date's correct. I took it off the website, so unless I make typos on these things all the time. Safety and efficacy, I believe, Joseph, we were saying that maybe there's another guest speaker as well, talking about, so stay tuned for more information there. And to finally, last but not least, again, thanks to all of our sponsors and partners, Praxis Spinal Cord Institute, and this pan-Canadian grouping that we've got together, everyone from Simon Fraser University, University of Calgary, and University of Waterloo, as well as all the team at University of Toronto that's coming across campus. So that's kind of it. I guess the last slide is question and A, but I think Joseph, you touched on a lot of the updates there. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us, and I'm happy to stick around if anybody's got any other questions. And again, a big thanks to you, Alexis and Terry. Thank you for enlightening us and giving us sort of a better understanding of some of the challenges you guys face.